Hi everyone, and welcome back to U.S. History today with me, Mr. Snyder, and we are going to begin today with a short introductory lesson to the Holocaust part of World War II. So, in summary, Hitler always targeted Jews for persecution, and when he gained the power to do so, he used it. So the Nazis, by the end of the war, had murdered 6 million Jews and 5 million other people that they considered inferior. There was no word for it back in 1945, but today it is called the Holocaust. And we continue to remember the legacy and this tragedy that it has left and seek ways to prevent anything like it from happening ever again. So like I said, there was no word for it in 1945, but we call it the Holocaust today, and it's a form of genocide, which we'll get to in a little bit. During the Nazis' rise to power in the late 20s and early 30s, they bring their breed of Nazism, which Hitler uses to usher in a new era of anti-Semitism, and we learned that that means hatred of Jews. So in his book Mein Kampf, Hitler blames all of the Jews for Germany's problems, the defeat in World War II, because they just sought a profit, because most of them are business owners. Communism, inflation, bad economy, it's all the Jews' fault. Nazis also disliked other undesirables, including gypsies, Jehovah's Witnesses, homosexuals, and people with physical and or mental disabilities, and the homeless, like people you would see on the street, beggars, drunkards, things like that. So when Hitler comes to power, the Nazis begin to persecute and discriminate against the Jews with new laws. At first, he bans all of the Jews from working in civil service, banking, law, journalism, and medicine, and he urges Germans to not go to patron Jewish businesses. And in 1935, the official Nuremberg laws are introduced, and this officially defines a Jew as somebody with at least 3 Jewish grandparents, and denied German citizenship to Jews, bans marriage between Jews and non-Jews, and basically segregates Jews in all aspects of society. Acts of violence are very, very common against Jews, and the people who are responsible are not brought to justice. There was, in November of 1938, there was the murder of a German diplomat in Paris by a Jew, and so the next night, Nazis order attacks on Jews in Austria, Germany, and the Sudetenland, which they had taken over by that point, in what is called Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass. And 1,500 synagogues or Jewish churches are burned to the ground. 7,500 Jewish businesses are destroyed, and 200 Jews are killed. 600 more are murdered, just outright in the violence. So in 1933, 1937, even before Kristallnacht, Jews see this is happening, they don't like it, and they try to leave. 129,000 Jews leave Austria and Germany, but they're not welcomed elsewhere because they're seen as immigrants that are competition for jobs in the Depression era, and the U.S. and other countries do not allow Jewish refugees in. There was a ship that came to Cuba full of Jews that tried to get into the United States. Cuba didn't allow them. We didn't allow them. They were returned to Germany, and they ended up in the concentration camps and killed. So Hitler keeps talking about his final solution to the Jewish question. And what the final solution is it's just the systematic extermination of all the Jews living in regions controlled by the Nazis, or the Third Reich. And today we would call it genocide, which is the willful annihilation of a racial, political, or cultural group. So it doesn't necessarily have to be by a government. It is in this case, and it usually is, but today we would call this genocide, but that word didn't exist back then. Concentration camps began to be opened by Hitler in 1933. They're not used at first to kill, but they are used to turn these undesirables, including Jews, into useful members of society, sort of rehabilitate them. Other types of people that Hitler puts into these camps are socialists, communists, labor leaders, and anyone who speaks out against Hitler are sent here. Even non-Jews who are married to Jews are sent here. Things that they did to these people, they made them work. Doctors used these people to conduct unethical medical experiments on prisoners, leaving them deformed or dead. They would run experiments on them. Some of them were put in chambers to see what would happen with oxygen deprivation. They used them like lab rats. It really was disgusting. The prisoners were made to work. They're tortured by the guards. Hypothermia and starvation are daily occurrences. And when they got there, they were marked on their vertically striped black and white pajamas with a colored triangle. They had a number tattooed on their arm, and then they were marked with a colored triangle that symbolized why they were there. For example, pink meant the person was a homosexual, yellow meant the person was a Jew, etc. Eventually, these concentration camps, most of them are turned into death camps where people are sent to be exterminated. They're transported from crowded, segregated ghettos in cities to be killed. They're transported by train there to be killed. The people are usually killed with carbon monoxide poisoning, insecticide called Zyklon B, and sometimes they were just shot by a firing squad. After the bodies are killed, they were made useful, so to speak. Human fat from these bodies was turned into soap. Human hair was woven into newer wigs. Slippers and bedding, and they would take valuables from the victims. They would take crowns out of the teeth. If the person had a cavity and a filling, they would pull that out. They would take jewelry. And then afterwards, the bodies were just burned in crematoriums. And so, like I said before, 6 million total Jews were exterminated during the war, and 5 million other undesirables were also exterminated. The Allied response to this was, if I had to sum it up, it would be too little too late. The U.S. did not allow Jewish refugees into their country during the 1930s, as we already talked about, the ones that were trying to leave. If it had relaxed its immigration policy, many of these deaths could have been prevented. But that's in the past. In 1944, when we start getting into Europe and liberating these camps, FDR establishes the War Refugee Board in order to work with the Red Cross to save some of these Jews in Eastern Europe. Stalin really doesn't care when the Soviet troops reach the camps. Stalin has no sympathy for these people. The U.S. and Great Britain's strategy during the war is focused on winning it and not stopping genocide. Any resources that we took to help out these people would have taken away from the war effort, and that is how they justified not helping them. Only in 1945, when the soldiers actually begin to reach and go into these camps, do the Allies realize how horrible the atrocities were. Many of these survivors are taken into temporary or permanent homes in the United States. And in 1948, the Jewish community in Palestine creates the nation of Israel, and the U.S. immediately recognizes the new Jewish state and becomes its greatest ally for a long time. So that is all we have to talk about the Holocaust. I know it's a very brief look at it, but this is in the context of World War II and what Germany was doing. It's not really a focus on the Holocaust, even though it was a terrible, terrible period in human history. So fill out your learning targets and bring them back to class with any questions you may have, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.